Millionaire tests his family by saying he went bankrupt. What his wife did is shocking. Henry Vaughan contemplated the panoramic view from his triplex penthouse while slowly swirling the whiskey in his crystal glass. At 55, owner of one of the largest construction companies in the country, he had achieved everything money could buy, but something was wrong, very wrong. Henry could no longer distinguish between genuine and fake smiles around him. The fortune he had built over decades seemed to have created an invisible barrier between him and the people he supposedly loved most. It was then that he made a decision that would forever change his family's path. He would test everyone's loyalty with a secret. "Dad, I need more money to buy that purse from the new collection," said Caitlin, his 22-year-old daughter, entering his office without knocking and extending her hand without even looking him in the eyes. Henry sighed. The young woman, who was studying fashion at an extremely expensive private university, had never worked a single day in her life. Her days were filled with shopping, yacht parties, and social media posts, showing a life of luxury that didn't cost her an ounce of effort. "Caitlin, sit down, we need to talk," Henry replied, serious. "Oh, Dad, I'm in a hurry. My friends are waiting for me to go to the Hamptons. The private jet is already prepared," she replied, rolling her eyes while frantically typing on her latest model phone. "Sit down, Caitlin," Henry's voice echoed through the room, finally making his daughter pay attention. At that moment, Lucy, Henry's wife of 25 years, entered the office accompanied by their youngest son, Greg, 19. Unlike his sister, the young man had a more serene expression, although he too had never faced financial difficulties. "What's happening, darling? Why the shouting?" asked Lucy, adjusting her diamond necklace that cost more than a middle-class apartment. Henry looked at his family and saw three strangers. Lucy, whom he had met when he was still a small entrepreneur struggling to get his first financing, now only showed interest when the subject involved money or status. Her eyes sparkled more at seeing new jewelry than at seeing her own husband come home after days of travel. "Everyone sit down. I have something serious to tell you," he finally said, closing his eyes for a moment as if seeking strength. The three sat down, uncomfortable with the solemn tone. Henry rarely spoke like this. "Our construction company is bankrupt. I've lost everything," he announced at once, carefully observing each one's reaction. Silence took over the room for a few seconds before Lucy let out a forced laugh. "It's a joke, right?" "Please, Henry, don't joke about this," she said, the smile gradually disappearing as she noticed her husband's serious expression. "It's not a joke. There was a corruption scheme involving our main contracts. I didn't know, but as the owner, I'm legally responsible. Our accounts have been frozen, assets are being inventoried. In a few days we won't have any of this anymore," he gestured, pointing to the luxurious penthouse. Caitlin let her phone fall to the floor and began to cry desperately. Lucy turned pale, clutching the armchair as if she could prevent the world from crumbling. How much is left?" she asked with a trembling voice. "Just my father's house in Cape Cod. That simple fisherman's house where I spent my childhood. That's where we'll have to go," Henry replied, observing the expression of horror on his wife's and daughter's faces. Greg, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "We're in this together, Dad. We'll start over." Henry felt a lump in his throat. It was the first time in years he had seen something genuine coming from a family member. "No!" shouted Lucy, standing up. "I won't live in a falling-apart cabin. There must be another solution." "I'm not going to that slum," protested Caitlin between tears, makeup running down her face. "What will my followers think?" Henry observed the reactions with a mixture of sadness and confirmation of his suspicions. His plan was just beginning. In the coming weeks, he would see who was really by his side out of love, not interest. "Pack only the essentials. We leave early tomorrow," he concluded, standing up and leaving the office, leaving behind Caitlin's and Lucy's hysterical screams. The sun had barely risen when Henry loaded the last suitcases into the trunk of his simplest car, a domestic model already several years old, kept in the garage for occasions when he didn't want to attract attention. Lucy came down the mansion stairs with a funeral expression, dressed as if going to a social event, even knowing she was heading to a humble house on the coast. "I can't believe you're doing this to us, Henry," she said for the 1,000th time, while the private chauffeur, who would be dismissed that day, carried her 6 designer suitcases. "I'm not doing anything, Lucy." "Life did," he responded dryly. Caitlin appeared next, eyes swollen from crying so much, dragging a single giant suitcase, complaining loudly that she had to leave 95% of her clothes behind. Greg was the last to appear, carrying only a backpack and his computer. Without complaining, he helped his father organize the suitcases in the car. "Can't we even take the chauffeur?" protested Lucy. "From now on, we'll save every penny. I'll drive myself," replied Henry, opening the passenger door for his wife, who entered as if being taken to her execution. The trip from New York to Cape Cod lasted almost 5 hours, with Lucy and Caitlin maintaining a sepulchral silence, interrupted only by dramatic sighs and occasional messages Caitlin sent to her rich friends, saying goodbye to her glamorous life. When the car finally entered the dirt road leading to Henry's father's old house, Lucy's and Caitlin's expressions became even darker. The simple construction, with 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, and 1 bathroom, was surrounded by fruit, trees, and had a view of the distant sea, but it was an absurd contrast to the mansion they had left. "This is a nightmare," muttered Caitlin, getting out of the car and looking at the dirt ground, afraid of dirtying her expensive shoes. Greg, on the other hand, took a deep breath of fresh air and smiled. "It has its charm," he said, observing the sunset beginning to form on the horizon. Henry opened the wooden door of the house, revealing the simple but clean interior. He had sent a team the day before to prepare everything, but without luxuries. Basic furniture, a small refrigerator, a simple stove. The walls needed painting, and the roof had some tiles that should be replaced. "Welcome to our new home," he announced. Lucy entered, looking at every corner with disdain. She walked to what would be her bedroom and let out a scream at seeing the simple double bed and the wooden wardrobe that would barely fit a quarter of her clothes. "Henry, please, this is ridiculous. We can rent something better, even if it's farther from the beach." "We don't have money, Lucy. This house is our only property now," he replied firmly. Caitlin threw herself on the worn-out sofa and began to cry again, while desperately checking if there was an internet signal. "No Wi-Fi? How will I post my content? How will I maintain my sponsorships?" she lamented. "You'll have to get a real job like any normal person," Henry replied straightforwardly. Night came, and with it darkness and the sounds of the surrounding woods. For Lucy and Caitlin, it was like being in a horror movie. For Greg, an adventure. For Henry, a revelation every minute about who the people he lived with truly were. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to our channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Days passed slowly, turning into weeks. Adapting to the new life was difficult for everyone, but especially torturous for Lucy and Caitlin, who refused to accept reality. While Henry and Greg were fixing the roof of the house on a sunny morning, Lucy watched from the window with a bitter expression. She wore one of her expensive outfits, totally inappropriate for that environment, as if refusing to accept that. Her life had changed. "How long will you keep up this charade, Henry?" she asked when her husband came in to drink water. "What charade? This is our reality now," he replied, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a towel. "I know you. You must have hidden money somewhere, must have some plan B. The Henry I know would never let himself be defeated like this," she insisted, approaching and trying, for the first time in weeks, a sweeter tone. Henry observed his wife. Even in that simple environment, she maintained her elegant posture, impeccably arranged hair, manicured nails. She looked like a displaced queen, unable to touch common ground. "There is no plan B, Lucy, it's over. The sooner you accept this, the better for all of us," he said, leaving the kitchen and leaving his frustrated wife behind. Meanwhile, Caitlin had found a small bar by the beach, frequented by tourists and some local young people. Without money to consume, she just observed, envying the groups arriving by boat with brand-name clothes and expensive drinks. It was on one of these days that she met Paul Mendoza, son of a local landowner, who owned several properties in the region. At 30, Paul was considered one of the best catchers in Cape Cod, with his tanned skin, athletic body, and the status that money provided. "You're not from around here," he said, approaching Caitlin, who was sitting alone on the sand. "No, I'm from New York," she replied, blushing slightly. Just vacationing or... Actually, we're living here now. Temporarily, of course, she quickly added, trying to keep up appearances. Paul smiled and sat down beside her. They talked for hours, and Caitlin felt once again close to the world she belonged to. When Paul invited her to dinner at his house the next day, she immediately accepted, already imagining it could be her way out of that nightmare. Upon returning home, she found Greg preparing dinner. Her brother had surprisingly adapted well to that simple life, learning to cook, fish, and even grow some vegetables in the small backyard. "Where are Mum and Dad?" she asked, throwing her bag on the sofa. "Dad went to town to buy materials to fix the sink. Mum..." He hesitated. "She left without saying where she was going. She looked dressed up." Caitlin nodded, without much interest. She was more concerned with what she would wear to dinner with Paul. She rummaged through her suitcase, looking for something that still seemed sophisticated enough. What Caitlin and Greg didn't know was that Lucy had found an opportunity she considered her salvation. During a walk through town, she met Colonel Jarvis, a middle-aged widower who owned several properties in the region and was known for his local political power. The colonel immediately showed interest in Lucy, impressed with her displaced elegance in that simple environment. "A woman like you deserves jewels, not seashells," he said, when he found her collecting small shells on the beach to decorate the house in a frustrated attempt to make the environment more pleasant. Lucy smiled, charmed by the flattery and mainly by the clear signs of wealth that the colonel displayed. The expensive watch, the imported car, the designer clothes. That night, as Henry was returning from town with construction materials, he was surprised to see his wife getting into a luxury car. He parked discreetly and observed the scene from afar. Lucy was smiling and touching Colonel Jarvis's arm, a gesture he knew well. It was the same one she used when she wanted something from him in the days of prosperity. With a heavy heart, not from jealousy but from confirmation of his suspicions, Henry drove back home. If there was any doubt about his wife's character, now there was none. The next morning, Caitlin woke up excited about her dinner with Paul. She spent the whole day preparing, using the few beauty products she had brought. At night, she wore her best dress and asked her brother to take her to the Mendoza estate. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked Greg, concerned. "You barely know this guy." "It's an opportunity, Greg. I can't stay trapped in this life forever," she replied, determined. The Mendoza estate was everything Caitlin expected. A colonial mansion surrounded by well-kept gardens, stables with purebred horses, uniformed staff. Paul received her with a kiss on the cheek, displaying her to his parents like an exotic curiosity. "So you're the daughter of the bankrupt businessman from New York?" asked Mrs. Mendoza, Paul's mother, bluntly, as they dined at a sumptuous table. Caitlin choked on her wine. How did they know? "Don't worry, dear. Everyone knows everything around here," the woman continued with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Your father owned that construction company involved in the scandal, right?" "It was a misunderstanding," defended Caitlin, feeling her cheeks burn. "We'll sort everything out soon and return to New York." Paul exchanged a knowing look with his parents that Caitlin didn't notice. After dinner, he took her to see the property, showing the horses, the swimming pool, the tennis courts, everything she missed the most. "You know, Caitlin, you're very beautiful," he said, approaching dangerously. "We could have fun while you're here. No commitment, of course." The condescending tone deeply hurt Caitlin. She realized he saw her as temporary entertainment, a fallen city girl in disgrace, available for amusement. "I think I misunderstood your intentions," she replied, moving away. "Oh, don't play hard to get. I know you're desperate to get out of that cabin," Paul laughed. "I'm offering a few moments of luxury. Isn't that what you want?" Caitlin felt tears of humiliation fill her eyes. Without answering, she turned around and walked quickly toward the exit. "Hey, come back here," shouted Paul, following her. "You don't even have money for a taxi. How will you get back?" "I'll walk," she replied, determined, despite knowing it was miles to her house. "Don't be ridiculous. It's dark. The road is dangerous." Paul held her arm. "I'm sorry, okay? Let's start over. I can take you home." Reluctantly, but with no alternative, Caitlin accepted the ride. During the entire journey, Paul tried to redeem himself, swearing it had just been a misunderstanding, that he was really interested in her. Even suspicious, Caitlin wanted to believe. It was her only connection to her previous life. Arriving home, she found only Greg, who was waiting for her, concerned. "How was it?" he asked, noticing his sister's red eyes. "I don't want to talk about it," she replied, going straight to her room. "Mom and Dad still haven't returned," informed Greg, following her. "I'm worried." Caitlin shrugged, lying down on the simple bed. "Mom probably found someone with money to finance her luxuries, and Dad must be in town trying to fix his life," she said bitterly. The night advanced and Henry didn't return. Lucy arrived around 3 in the morning, perfumed and with smudged lipstick, surprised to find Greg awake. In the living room. "Where's your father?" she asked, taking off her high-heeled shoes. "We were hoping you'd know," replied the young man, serious. Lucy shrugged and went to the bedroom, while Greg remained in the living room, worried. Only the next morning did Henry appear, looking tired and dejected. "Where were you?" asked Greg, serving coffee to his father. "I needed to think. Slept in the car," he replied simply. The days transformed into routine. Henry spent most of his time fixing things around the house or fishing with Greg, who increasingly showed interest in learning practical tasks. Lucy hardly appeared at home, always dressed up to go out, always returning late. Caitlin, after the humiliating experience with Paul, started staying more at home, occasionally helping her brother in the kitchen or the backyard, albeit reluctantly. It was on a Sunday afternoon, while Henry and Greg were fishing in a small canoe a few feet from the beach, that the young man finally built up the courage to ask what he had been suspecting. "Dad, are we really bankrupt?" Henry looked at his son for a long moment before answering. "Why do you ask, son?" "Some things don't make sense. If we were completely broke, how can we maintain this house even if it's simple? How do we still have your car? And I've noticed that sometimes you make calls in secret, speaking quietly." Henry smiled slightly. Greg had always been observant. "What do you think?" He returned the question. "I think this is a test," replied the young man, frowning. "You're testing all of us, especially Mom." Henry cast his line into the water again before confirming, "Yes, son, and each of you is giving me exactly the answers I feared." At that moment, a fish took Greg's bait, interrupting the conversation, but the silence that followed was one of mutual understanding. The young man didn't ask anything more, respecting his father's plan, whatever it might be. Meanwhile, in town, Lucy was living her own distorted fairy tale. Colonel Jarvis covered her with gifts, perfumes, clothes, jewelry, and promised he would soon remove her from that miserable life. In her fantasies, Lucy imagined herself as the new Mrs. Jarvis, regaining her status, and perhaps even surpassing the luxurious life she had before. "My dear, why don't you move into my house right away?" suggested the Colonel during an expensive lunch in Cape Cod. "I still can't," she replied thoughtfully. "I need to prepare my children, especially Greg. He's very attached to his father." The truth, which Lucy wouldn't admit even to herself, was that she wasn't entirely convinced Henry had lost everything. Part of her believed her husband was too smart to let himself be completely ruined. And what if he was just going through a rough patch, but would soon recover everything? It would be foolish to throw away 2 decades of marriage for a recent romance. The Colonel noticed this hesitation and didn't like it. His interest in Lucy was genuine but also calculating. A woman like her, sophisticated and with connections in New York, would be an excellent trophy to display in local social circles. But he needed to have her completely, not halfway. For Caitlin, life had taken an unexpected turn after the episode with Paul. Too embarrassed to return to the beach bar or any place frequented by the local elite, she began helping an elderly woman who sold crafts to tourists. Mrs. Zoe, a black woman in her 70s, was skilled with straw and shells, creating beautiful pieces that caught the attention of visitors. "You have good hands, girl," said Mrs. Zoe one day, watching Caitlin perfectly assemble a shell necklace. "You should make your own pieces." The idea seemed ridiculous at first to Caitlin, who had never considered working with her hands. But, seeing the money some pieces brought in, she started to take interest. Over time, she created her own style, mixing artisanal techniques with a contemporary touch she had learned in fashion design courses. Soon, tourists began specifically looking for pieces by the New York girl, willing to pay more for costume jewelry that looked like exclusive design jewelry. For the first time in her life, Caitlin felt the pleasure of earning her own money, of being valued for something she created, not for what she owned or who her father was. On a sunny afternoon, while displaying her pieces at Mrs. Zoe's stall, Caitlin saw Paul approach with a group of friends. She felt her stomach drop. Since the dinner disaster, she had avoided him at all costs. "Look who's here," he said loudly to his friends. "The bankrupt princess from New York now sells trinkets to survive." The friends laughed, and Caitlin felt her cheeks burn with shame. "These are exclusive handcrafted pieces, not trinkets," replied Mrs. Zoe, standing in front of Caitlin. "And they cost more than you can afford, young man." Paul frowned, not used to being contradicted, especially by an elderly lady. "How much is this necklace here?" he asked, pointing to the most expensive piece in the display, an intricate necklace that Caitlin had spent days making. $1,000, replied Mrs. Zoe, deliberately inflating the price. To the surprise of both, Paul took out his wallet, pulled out the money and threw it on the table. "I'll take it. Let's see if it's as good as it looks," he said, taking the necklace and placing it around the neck of a blonde who accompanied him. "It matches your eyes, honey." The girl smiled, kissing him on the mouth while looking directly at Caitlin in a clear provocation. The group walked away laughing, leaving Caitlin humiliated but $1,000 richer. "Don't give it importance, girl," consoled Mrs. Zoe. "You sold your best piece. That's what matters." But it mattered more than that. That public humiliation was a breaking point for Caitlin. That night, crying in her room, she realized she had lost not only money and status, but dignity. She was allowing people like Paul to define her worth. It was then that she decided she would no longer be a victim of circumstances. If she had to live in this reality, she would do it on her own terms. The next day, she got up determined, set aside part of the money from the sale, and sought out Greg. "I need your help," she told her brother. "I want to start my own accessories business." Greg, surprised by his sister's change in attitude, helped her develop a simple plan. They would buy materials in larger quantities to lower the cost, create a digital catalog to reach customers beyond tourists, and use a space in the backyard as an improvised workshop. Henry observed this transformation with a mixture of pride and melancholy. Seeing his daughter finally understanding the value of work and independence was everything he had always wanted, but he had to lose everything or pretend to have lost for it to happen. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to our channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. One afternoon, while Caitlin and Greg were working in the improvised workshop in the backyard, Lucy arrived accompanied by Colonel Jarvis. She was especially elegant, wearing a new dress, certainly a gift from him, and jewelry that sparkled in the sun. "Children, I want to introduce you to Colonel Anthony Jarvis," she said, forcing a smile. "A great friend who has been helping us a lot." Greg and Caitlin exchanged uncomfortable glances. Both knew exactly what kind of friendship it was. "Pleased to finally meet you," said the Colonel, extending his hand. "Your mother talks about you a lot." "I hope she also talks about our father," replied Greg dryly, refusing to shake the extended hand. "Greg," Lucy reprimanded, "be polite." Caitlin, more diplomatic, greeted the man with a quick handshake before turning her attention back to the necklace she was assembling. "Nice work," commented the Colonel, observing the pieces spread out on the improvised table. "You've got talent, young lady." "Thank you," replied Caitlin without raising her eyes. "Actually, we came with a proposal," continued Lucy, ignoring the tense atmosphere. "The Colonel has a wonderful beach house with several empty rooms. He invited us to stay there until we resolve our situation." "And where would Dad be in this arrangement?" asked Greg, crossing his arms. Lucy hesitated, nervously touching the pearl necklace around her neck. "Your father is adapted to this life. But you are young, you deserve comfort, opportunities. You're inviting us to abandon Dad. Caitlin's voice rose, incredulous. It's not abandoning, dear, it's moving forward, Lucy tried to explain. Your father made choices that brought us here. I don't see why we have to suffer for it. His choices gave us everything we had before, defended Greg. And now that he needs support, you want us to turn our backs. The Colonel, realizing the situation was getting out of control, intervened. I see it's a delicate matter. Perhaps we should discuss this another time, when your husband is present, Lucy. The mention of Henry as husband made Lucy blush slightly. Yes, of course, she quickly agreed. Let's go, Anthony. I'll show you that spot on the beach I mentioned. After they left, Caitlin and Greg remained silent for a few moments, processing what had just happened. She's going to abandon Dad, Caitlin finally said, her voice choked. I think she abandoned him a long time ago, replied Greg. She's just making it official now. Should we tell him? He probably already knows, said Greg, remembering conversations with his father. And honestly, I don't think he cares as much as we imagine. That night was especially silent at dinner. Henry, who had spent the day supposedly looking for work in town, seemed distant. Lucy, still perfumed after her meeting with the Colonel, barely touched the simple food Greg had prepared. Only Caitlin tried, without much success, to maintain some conversation about her incipient accessories business. I'm thinking of creating a website, she commented. Mrs. Zoe knows a young woman who works with that and can help me for a reasonable price. That's good, daughter, replied Henry, finally showing interest. It's good to see you taking initiative. I don't know why you're trying so hard for such little return, interrupted Lucy. If only you'd let me introduce you to the right people. The right people, according to you, are like Paul Mendoza? Caitlin retorted. No, thank you. I prefer to build something of my own, however small it may be. You too, Lucy pointed to her children, are letting yourselves be contaminated by this mentality of conformity from your father. There's a world out there waiting for you. A world where we need to use other people to get what we want? Questioned Greg. Is that the world you're exploring, Mum? Lucy stood up abruptly, throwing her napkin on the table. I won't tolerate this kind of insinuation, Greg. I'm just trying to give you what you deserve. And what do we deserve in your opinion? Asked Henry calmly, speaking for the first time. Tell us, Lucy, what do our children deserve? The question caught Lucy by surprise. For a moment, she seemed genuinely confused. Comfort, opportunities, connections, everything we had before. You think that's what they had, insisted Henry, because what I saw were two empty young people without purpose, completely dependent on my money, unable to value anything, because they never had to fight for anything. How dare you, exclaimed Lucy. Our children always had the best of everything. Things, Lucy. They had things. They didn't have values. They didn't have character. They didn't have grit. Look at them now. In a few weeks here, Greg has learned to fish, cook, fix things. Caitlin discovered a talent she didn't know she had and is starting her own business. They're becoming people. Caitlin and Greg observed the discussion in silence, surprised by their father's words. This is madness, retorted Lucy. You're romanticizing poverty, Henry. Our lives were perfect before. Our lives were an illusion, he replied, also standing up. A bubble of luxury that isolated us from reality. When that bubble burst, see what remained. You running into the arms of the first rich man who appeared. Lucy's hand flew toward Henry's face, but he grabbed her wrist before the slap could hit him. Don't deny what's obvious to all of us, Lucy, he said, releasing her arm. Have at least the dignity to own your choices. You don't understand anything, she replied, tears of anger in her eyes. I deserve more than this. I deserve the life you promised me when we got married. I promised to love and respect you, not be your bank, Lucy. It's easy for you to say. It wasn't you who sacrificed a career to be a wife and mother. It wasn't you who left everything behind. And what exactly did you leave behind, Lucy? Questioned Henry. Because as far as I remember, when we met, you were a failed model trying to make an advantageous marriage. The silence that followed was deafening. Caitlin and Greg had never heard this version of the story. At all parties and social gatherings, their parents had always represented the perfect couple, the entrepreneurial fairy tale, the promising young entrepreneur who fell in love with the beautiful model. "Don't you dare," whispered Lucy, trembling with anger. "I'm not going to pretend anymore, Lucy. Not for our children, not for myself. I'm tired. If you want to leave with your colonel, go. The door is open." Lucy looked at her children, expecting some support, but found only shocked expressions. Without saying anything more, she left the room and locked herself in the bedroom. Dinner ended there, with the three of them sitting in silence, the weight of the revelations hanging over them. Days passed without Lucy speaking to any of them. She left early and returned late, when she returned at all. On one of these nights, when she didn't come back to sleep, Henry called the children for a conversation. "I have something to tell you," he began, his countenance serious. "Is it about Mom and the Colonel?" asked Caitlin. "No, it's about us. About the truth." Greg straightened up in his chair, as if already expecting what was coming. "Our company never went bankrupt. There was no scandal," revealed Henry. Caitlin's eyes widened while Greg merely nodded, confirming his suspicions. "This was all a test," she asked, her voice trembling between anger and confusion. "A lesson," corrected Henry. "I spent years watching you become people I didn't recognize. Caitlin, you live to show off on social media, spending fortunes on frivolities, treating people as disposable. Greg, you were on the path to becoming a purposeless playboy, living in the shadow of my money. And your mother? Well, I think it's now clear to all of us who she really is." "You deceived us," accused Caitlin, tears of anger streaming down her face. "You made us go through all this, the humiliation, the poverty." "Poverty?" interrupted Henry with a sad smile. "Daughter, this is far from poverty. It's just a simple life like most people live. And look what it did to you. You discovered a talent, built something of your own, learned the value of work. You are much more Caitlin now than you ever were in that mansion." The girl fell silent, processing her father's words. "What happens now?" asked Greg calmly. "Now do we reveal the truth to your mother?" suggested Henry. "Or do we let her go her way with the Colonel?" "Wait," asked Caitlin, wiping away her tears. "I think Mom deserves to know the truth, but I don't know if it would be fair to simply forgive her after everything she's done. She would abandon us without thinking twice." Henry looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and sadness. "Sometimes forgiving is more for ourselves than for the other person, Caitlin, but I understand your point." "And what about us?" asked Greg. "Do we go back to New York, to the mansion?" "Actually," Henry hesitated, "I sold everything." "What?" exclaimed the children in unison. "When I decided to do this, I realized I didn't want that life anymore. I sold the mansion, the cars, the company shares. I bought a new house, smaller but still comfortable, near the beach in a small town on the North Shore, a place for us to start over." "And the construction company?" asked Greg. "It's still ours, but I completely reformulated it. We redirected the focus to affordable housing, sustainable projects. It's less profitable, but much more rewarding." Caitlin and Greg looked at each other, trying to absorb everything they were hearing. "I think we should tell Mom," Greg finally said. "Not because she deserves it, but because it's the right thing to do." "I agree," said Henry. "Tomorrow we'll reveal everything." However, fate had other plans. The next morning, while they were having breakfast, they were surprised by Lucy storming into the house like a hurricane. "Pack your things," she announced, agitated. "We're leaving this place." "What happened?" asked Henry, observing his wife's altered state. "Your friend Colonel, that's what happened," she replied, anger and humiliation in her voice. "That scoundrel, that liar, everything false, everything a farce. The jewelry, the watch, even the car." "Calm down, Mom," asked Greg. "Explain properly. Last night after dinner at his supposed mansion, a man showed up collecting debts, many debts. The Colonel isn't even a colonel at all. He's a scammer who lives on appearances and debts. He fooled the entire town, including the idiot here." She pointed to herself. "I had to escape through the back door while creditors ransacked the house." Caitlin couldn't contain a nervous laugh, which soon turned into a guffaw. Greg joined her, and even Henry let a smile escape. "May I know what's so funny?" questioned Lucy, indignant. "I was humiliated." "The humor, Lucy," replied Henry, regaining his composure, "is that you abandoned your bankrupt husband to be with a man who was pretending to be rich. The irony is delicious. What are you talking about? Lucy frowned, confused. Sit down, Mum, invited Greg. We have something to tell you. In the following minutes, Henry revealed the whole truth. The forged bankruptcy, the character test, the actual sale of assets, and the plan to start over. With each word, Lucy grew paler. So, you made us go through all this to test me? She finally asked, her voice almost gone. To test all of us, corrected Henry, and each of us gave our answer. Including you, Mom, added Caitlin, unable to hide her resentment. Lucy looked at the three, the reality of her actions finally hitting her with full force. She had chosen fake jewelry over her real family. She began, but words failed her. You don't need to say anything now, said Henry. We're leaving this house tomorrow. You're welcome to come with us if you want. Otherwise, he left, the sentence hanging, but the message was clear. It would be the end of the marriage. Lucy rose in silence and went out to the backyard, needing air, space to think. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time in her life, she was being forced to look at her own choices without excuses or illusions. Night came, and Lucy did not return to the house. Henry showed no surprise or even sadness, just a kind of resignation, like someone finally accepting a truth they always knew. Should we look for her? Asked Caitlin, concerned despite everything. Your mother is an adult. She knows how to take care of herself, replied Henry. She always has. The next morning dawned clear and sunny, a perfect day for new beginnings. Henry and the children packed the few things they had brought and some new ones they had acquired during those weeks. Caitlin insisted on taking all her craft materials and the pieces she had created. I'm going to continue with this, even if I don't need the money anymore, she explained when Greg questioned her. I discovered that I like creating, making something with my own hands. Henry smiled, proud of his daughter's transformation. They were loading the last things into the car when they saw Lucy approaching on the dirt road. She was walking, her high-heeled shoes in her hand, her expensive dress dirty with dust, her hair disheveled. Lucy? Henry couldn't hide his surprise. Can I? She hesitated, pride fighting against need. Can I go with you? Henry observed his wife for a long moment. There was no longer the gleam of arrogance in her eyes, only fatigue and perhaps a glimpse of regret. Where did you go last night? He asked. To town. I stayed in a cheap hotel, the only one I could afford with the little money I had, she answered honestly. I spent the night thinking about everything, about who I've become. Caitlin and Greg exchanged glances, waiting for their father's decision. Part of them wanted to reject their mother as she would have rejected them, but another part knew that real families give second chances. Get in the car, Henry finally said, showing no emotion. We can talk during the trip. The journey to the new house was initially silent and tense. Lucy sat in the back seat with Caitlin, while Greg occupied the front passenger seat. Gradually, however, the exuberant landscape of the Massachusetts coast softened the atmosphere. So where exactly are we going? Asked Lucy, breaking the silence. Martha's Vineyard, replied Henry. I bought a house there, close to the beach. It's not a mansion, but it's spacious and comfortable. And the company? I opened a small office in town. I intend to work less and live more, he explained. The social projects we started are working out, building quality, affordable housing. Lucy nodded, absorbing the information. She seemed genuinely interested, not just in the financial aspect as before. And you, Caitlin? Will you continue with your crafts? She asked, turning to her daughter. Yes, replied the young woman, surprised by her mother's interest. Actually, I'm thinking of turning this into my own brand, contemporary crafts, mixing traditional elements with modern design. That's a great idea, said Lucy, and for the first time in a long time, her compliment seemed sincere. You always had good taste in accessories. The rest of the trip was lighter, with tentative conversations about future plans and reflections on what they had learned in recent weeks. When they finally arrived at the new house, the sun was beginning to set, casting orange hues over the sea visible from the porch. The residence was exactly as Henry had described. not ostentatious but beautiful and welcoming. It had 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room overlooking the sea, an integrated kitchen, and a small garden in the back. Simple but quality furniture decorated the rooms, and large windows let in natural light and the sea breeze. "It's perfect," commented Greg, exploring the rooms with enthusiasm. "Better than that cabin, for sure," joked Caitlin, already choosing which would be her room. Lucy remained silent, observing everything with an expression difficult to decipher. When she finally spoke, her voice was choked. "Thank you for letting me come." Henry, who was arranging some things in the kitchen, stopped what he was doing and looked at his wife. "It won't be easy, Lucy. We'll need to rebuild a lot between us." "I know," she replied, lowering her eyes, "but I want to try. For real." That night, they dined together on the porch with a simple meal that Greg prepared. The conversation flowed naturally, without the tension that had characterized their interactions in recent weeks. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was a beginning. As he watched his son excitedly telling about his plans to study oceanography at the nearby university, and Caitlin showing her mother drawings of new pieces she planned to create, Henry felt a peace that money had never bought. The test he had applied had been painful for everyone, including himself, but had revealed essential truths that were hidden under layers of luxury and convenience. Greg had discovered a strength and independence he didn't know he possessed. Caitlin had found a purpose beyond appearances and social approval. And Lucy, well, perhaps Lucy was just beginning her journey of self-discovery. As for himself, Henry finally understood that his relentless pursuit of financial success had exacted too high a price. Now, looking at the sea under the moonlight, with his imperfect but real family by his side, he knew he had found true wealth. "You know," said Lucy as they watched the stars after dinner, "that fake Colonel taught me something important." "What?" asked Henry, curious. "That it's very easy to be enchanted by the shine without realizing it's just cheap costume jewelry," she replied, looking directly at her husband. "Real jewels don't need to show off so much." Henry smiled, extending his hand to his hesitant wife. Maybe, just maybe, there was still something valuable to be saved there. In the following months, each found their rhythm in the new life. Henry dedicated himself to social projects through his reformulated construction company, returning home in time to see the sunset every day. Greg began his studies in oceanography, fascinated by the sea that was now his backyard. Caitlin transformed her hobby into a promising business, creating handcrafted pieces that soon gained prominence in sophisticated boutiques in the region. And Lucy, surprisingly, found her vocation helping organize charity events for underprivileged communities served by Henry's projects. Her social experience and good taste, previously dedicated only to ostentation, proved valuable for raising funds and raising awareness among influential people. It wasn't a perfect story. There were difficult days, arguments, moments when the past came back to haunt them. Lucy still struggled against materialistic impulses. Caitlin occasionally relapsed into superficial behaviors, and even Greg sometimes questioned if he had chosen the right path. But, unlike before, now they talked about these issues, faced them, together grew through them. The family that almost fell apart due to the illusion of wealth now strengthened in authenticity. On a sunny afternoon, almost a year after the beginning of that unexpected journey, Henry found Lucy sitting alone, on the porch watching the sea. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting beside her. "About how I was on the verge of throwing away everything that really matters for things that are worth nothing," she replied, with an honesty that still surprised him sometimes. "And do you regret it?" Lucy pondered for a moment before answering. "What I did, deeply. But what happened afterward? No, we needed that reality check. I needed it." Henry nodded, understanding. He took his wife's hand in his, feeling the wedding ring she had never removed, even in the worst moments. "You know what I discovered this year, Lucy? That sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what we truly have." She smiled, squeezing her husband's hand in silent response. It wasn't a fairy tale, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in the end, that's what mattered. The end. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, Please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to our channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. So what did you think? Was Henry right to test his family? What would you have done in Lucy's place? Leave your opinion in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Your like and subscription are essential for us to continue bringing stories that touch hearts and make you reflect.